I love that. You know, this our testimony tonight. How many people love testimonies? We love them, right? Our testimony tonight is from a young lady that I kind of know pretty well. She's been around for a few years, and we have watched her really blossom. So much so that she's a part of our family in many ways, that more than one. She's a great person. But here's something I want you to know about Katie. She was just like you or I when we walked through the door. She wondered if this was going to work. She was kind of at the end of her rope, and she really didn't know if there was hope and healing available for her. And I think you'll find as you hear her story that not only is there hope and healing, there's promises from God. So will you do me a favor? Will you stand up and give a big warm welcome to Katie?
Thank you. My story is one of misguidance, pain, forgiveness, and love. It's one of finding my worth in God. It has been a journey, and it is still ongoing. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus, in recovery for PTSD and depression. I celebrate recovery over a lack of self-worth, and my name is Katie. I was born in 1983. Shortly after, my parents divorced. Part of me always thought that it was my fault. While I knew that both of my parents loved me, I had very different relationships with them. I was really close to my mom, but my dad and I had a strained relationship. I was his little girl, but there were times when I felt like we would have been closer if I had been a boy. We didn't have any of the same interests, other than a few movies, basketball, and fishing. My brother, on the other hand, was like a miniature version of my dad. They had everything in common. I often felt like I was on the outside, watching them from a distance. When I was a young teenager, I had several experiences with an older teenage family member that led me to feeling like my body was a dirty thing. I was watched on and spied by the wrong person. I was a subject of lust for the wrong person. It created a warped sense of sexuality in me. My first college boyfriend spent most of our relationship treating me like I wasn't there, except for taking my virginity and telling me that sex was all I would ever be good for. After that, I went on to prove his words. I dropped out of college and spent 5 years bouncing from guy to guy. Eventually, I met a guy who managed to stick. Well, it stuck for a little while at least. Dating, engagement, breakup, all in a year. I was left knowing that I wasn't good enough for the good guy. In an effort to take my mind off of the situation, a friend of mine invited me out to watch his band play. It was there where I met a guy who was the opposite of my ex-fiancé. He was everything that my ex wasn't. I was drawn to his outspokenness and what appeared to be protectiveness. We would spend every weekend together. This meant that I stopped going to church. What had been a constant in my life was gone. Within just a few months, it was clear to me that I wasn't enough for him either. He was angry all the time. It wasn't long before his outspokenness became a constant complaint, belittling, and a raised voice. His protectiveness became possessiveness and accusations. I spent 4 years being lost in a vicious cycle of fights, tears, and being made to feel like nothing I did was ever enough. Eventually, we were married, and it only got worse. On March 29th, 2010, I finally stood up for myself. Death threats and cuss words were spewed at me while I packed up the dog and my stuff, and I left. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized. Within the next week, I found out that I was pregnant. See, while I was waiting for my divorce to process, I started dating. As soon as he found out that we were having a kid, he wanted me to marry him. Obviously, that wasn't going to happen since the ink on my divorce wasn't even dry yet. He wouldn't stop pushing, so I left him. A month later, he found someone who would marry him, and he walked away from me and from our son. For the next 4 years, I bounced from abusive and controlling relationships to controlling and abusive relationships. Anytime a guy would show me attention, I would give him the one thing that I thought I had to offer, the only thing I thought he would want from me, my body. But even then, that was taken from me. In August of 2014, on a first date, I was sexually assaulted on a back road in the woods. I was so scared, and I was so lost in more ways than one. By the time I got back home that next morning, I knew I just had to push it all away and focus on my son. I just wanted to forget all about the night before. I didn't want to be the victim. I didn't want to be scared, and I didn't want to be scarred. But that's exactly what I was. I gave in to my tendency to want to isolate. I bottled it up, shut myself off, and let my past control my future. I began to use my body as a weapon against pain. I took control of situations, giving guys what they wanted from the start before they could even ask for it. They couldn't take it from me if I gave it up, and I could stay in control of my body. The thing was, in an effort to keep control, I was out of control. I was isolating more than ever, throwing myself at guys who had no good intentions, sinking into my PTSD, and letting my depression call all the shots. I hated myself, and I hated my life. I only saw one way of stopping it. I had to remove myself from the situation. It had been years since my life seemed so desolate that the only way to fix it was to end my pain my way. But this time was different. This time I was a single mom. I was the only parent in my child's life. My PTSD and depression had me convinced that my son would be better off without me in the state that I was in. I spent years actively trying to just end my mental pain and exhaustion anytime he wasn't with me. I didn't want to die, but looking back, I know that's what would have happened. Clearly, God had other plans for me because, as you can see, I'm still here. And then God did his thing again. He sent an earthly angel to save my life. A cry for help on Facebook turned into an invitation to a recovery group from a high school friend. On May 30th, 2017, I joined him and his family at Celebrate Recovery First Assembly in North Little Rock. First Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11 says, "So encourage each other, build each other up just as you are already doing." And that's exactly what I saw that night. I didn't know what to think. It was chip night. It was loud. People were cheering and clapping. Everywhere I looked, I saw hope. I wanted it. I was so desperate for change. What I was doing wasn't working. So why not give this a try? But as ready for it as I was, it wasn't an immediate change. I spent months keeping to myself. I would share in small group, but I would sit alone in large group. I would sit at a table with just my child while I was eating dinner. I was cordial to people and spoke when spoken to, but I was still so skittish. I like to compare myself to an abused dog. I knew that change was coming and that I was surrounded by good people, but I was still so afraid to put myself out there and risk being hurt again. I was fragile, and I was one wrong word or wrong touch away from lashing out at someone, regardless of who they were. I kept hearing people talk about step studies and decided to sign up for one. It was in this step study that I was able to see the part that I played in the insanity of my past. See, up until then, I was a victim. My childhood was my dad's fault. My early view on sex was my family member's fault and my ex-boyfriend's fault. Every guy who took advantage of me after that, it was their fault. Everything I endured from my ex-husband was his fault. I was the victim in every situation except when I was raped. In that situation, all I saw were all of the things that I did wrong that allowed him to do what he did. During my first step study, a lot of things were revealed to me. First, while I had been a Christian my whole life, I had never given my full heart and life to God. I kept parts of myself blocked off, like there was a wall between them and God. I went to church, and I was in the choir. I taught Sunday school. I was a youth counselor, and I helped with the children's ministry. And I always prayed before every meal. But that's as far as it went. Saturday sinner, Sunday saint. That was my life. Realizing that I had been forcing God away from certain parts of my life, hiding them from him, was a freeing realization. It allowed me to start tearing down those walls and letting him in. Second, I owned my responsibility. I wasn't used by guys. I was used by me. The guys in my past aren't at fault for taking what I willingly gave them, threw at them. Sure, they didn't have to do what they did, but it was my fault. Let me say that again. It was my fault that I gave it up so willingly. That was my choice. Third, I honestly evaluated my relationship with my ex-husband. I was able to spot all of the red flags that I had missed. While I know that his behavior was his fault, I was able to see how me staying in the relationship was my fault. I was able to see all of the times that I allowed him to treat me like dirt, and I kept coming back. And let me tell you, that's not what we mean when we say keep coming back. And lastly, I stepped into service. I got out of my comfort zone and I joined the sanctuary team. I forced myself to become part of a team that went to where the people were, instead of hiding in the shadows like I preferred to do, sometimes still prefer to do. On this team, I was able to see past the masks to the pain that we all try to hide. But all of this was only the beginning for me. I was still a huge work in progress. See, I was smiling and cheerful when talking to people, but as soon as they were gone, my smile would fade and my cheerfulness would vanish. I was still a wreck. In 2018, on our Nail It to the Cross night, I cried out to God, begging for him to build confidence in me, to show me how to love myself. I didn't even know what that would look like. A month later, God brought a man into my life who changed everything. What started out as an extremely unlikely friendship between two horribly messed up people turned into one of the best things God has ever done in my life. Through my new friend, I learned to see myself through the eyes of someone else. God used him to teach me how to love myself. God used him to build confidence in me. And God used our friends to show me that it's okay to let people in and form true friendships with people who love me for who I am, not who I pretend to be. If this were one of those Lifetime movies, it would end here with my newfound confidence. But that's not how real life works. That guy and I started dating, and we did everything the wrong way. Living together, sleeping together, lying to everyone else around us, and hiding what we were doing. We were a disaster. We were going against God's plan for us. We knew we had to change that. So on January 12th, 2019, we got married. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and marry the first messed up person you meet just so you can justify living with them or sleeping with them. In fact, that's exactly what you are not supposed to do. The weekend that we got married, my now in-laws, who happened to be our ministry leaders, came up to us. They told us that they knew we had been going against our leadership contracts by living together and sleeping together. We were removed from our leadership positions and told that after a period of restoration, we would have the chance to be reinstated to leadership. We spent the next few months with both of us in step studies, attending Celebrate Recovery every Tuesday and Friday night, and going to Life Recovery Central every weekend. We made sure that we were at every leadership training, and we continued on the proper path. After our step studies were complete, we were reinstated to leadership. Again, sounds like that would be a great happy ending, but like I already said, it's not how real life works. In 2019, on a Tuesday, I received a phone call from my dad. He was calling to tell me that he had been diagnosed with cancer. I was devastated. I was so afraid that I had spent 35 years holding on to a grudge against him, and my time was up. Even though I had forgiven him for his part in my past, I had never been completely honest with him. In my second step study, I was convicted by steps 8 and 9. Step 8 says, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends. For the first time, my dad was listed on my amends list as somebody who I had hurt. I had to make my amends with him. I had to apologize for the part that I played in the disintegration of our relationship. It wasn't all him. He had his faults, but so did I. Steps 8 and 9 weren't just about the obvious hurts I caused. It wasn't about that time I lost my temper on someone or that time I stole money from somebody. It was about those times that I misjudged someone. It was about those times that I had pulled back from somebody based on how I read a situation. It was about the damage I had done to relationships while blaming others for their faults. God showed me that I had been unfair to my dad. He grew up in a house with alcoholism and abuse. He grew up with a military father who was mostly absent. When my grandfather was home, all he and my grandmother did was butt heads and fight. He grew up in a home that operated like a dictatorship. It was my grandmother's way or no way at all. That's still how she is. Fall in line or get out of the house. He grew up with anger, bitterness, harsh punishments as his norm. He didn't know how to be any other way. Now, don't get me wrong. He wasn't near as rough as his parents, but he didn't know how to be soft. He had never been taught grace and compassion. My mom grew up in a house full of warmth, laughter, love, hope, and Jesus. Everyone, family or not, felt welcome in their house. It was a common occurrence to walk into their home and be greeted immediately with a hug and a plate of food from my grandma. You would catch my grandpa 3 or 4 times a day saying his rosary, each decade dedicated to him praying for another person or situation in life. Needless to say, my parents came from totally different backgrounds, and it showed. I was judging my dad's parenting based on my mom's parenting. I was expecting him to have the same level of connection and compassion that she did, that her family did. But he didn't come from that. He did what he could as a dad with what he was taught. So it wasn't his actions that caused the problem. It was my expectations of him, which he didn't know and didn't know how to live up to, that caused the problems. It was me. I had to clean my side of the street, as we say. And I was faced with the possibility of never being able to do that if I didn't do it then. Step 9 says we made direct amends whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. When I reached out to my dad and we had that conversation, something that was broken healed. It was that final piece of our puzzle that made us whole again. Things aren't perfect with us, but we are able to proceed with an adult father-daughter relationship with all our cards on the table. We have transparency, honesty, and a firm knowledge that we are forgiven, not just by each other, but by God. We were able to start over. And thanks to his wonderful doctors who removed his cancer, we have many more years to make up for all of our time lost to bitterness and hurt. Through these steps, I was able to see that the insanity of my past was my own. I had to own it. I had to reconcile it against the image of my past that I'd held on to for so long. I had to make amends for it, and I had to change it. Through these steps, I was able to accept that relationships can only be mended if I am honest about the part that I played in its brokenness. Knowing that God would guide me through it was freeing. I wasn't alone in the process. And even if my apology wasn't accepted by others, God has forgiven me. Through my forever family, I found an accountability team who has been there for me when I couldn't do it myself. There have been times in this process when depression and PTSD took over, when I thought I just couldn't go one more day if that was going to be my norm. But my sisters lifted me up. My now husband stood beside me on the battlefield of my mind. I'm not alone in this fight anymore, and that's all because of Celebrate Recovery. It was at Celebrate Recovery that I stepped into my own, found my voice, and learned to love me. It was at Celebrate Recovery that I learned that I have a lot to offer, the least of which is my body. It was at Celebrate Recovery that I fell in love. I fell in love with my friends. I fell in love with my sisters, myself, my forever family, my in-laws, and yes, my husband too. But most importantly, I fell in love with God. So if you're new here, thank you. Thank you for giving us a chance. Even if you're being forced to be here, you're still here. You are loved here. You are valued here. And you are wanted here. If all you think you can do is show up, do it. Keep coming back. The rest will come in time. If you think you can do more, do it. You belong here. We have a place for you here. Romans 12, 9 through 13 states, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need, and practice hospitality. Without a doubt, that is what you will find at Celebrate Recovery. You will find people who will honestly and sincerely love you. We will stand beside you when the enemy comes at you, ready to fight the battle with you. We will hold to the good, reminding you of the positive in you. We will celebrate your victories and pray for you during your struggles. I can say all of this because that's what my forever family does for me. Nope, it's not going to be easy, but nothing worth it ever is. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a struggle. There will be days when you just don't want to be here and don't want to be sober. And you don't want to work the program. But those are the days when you need it the most. And those are the days when your accountability team will step in to keep you on the path that will keep you safe and keep you alive. We say keep coming back for a reason. Sometimes all you can do is show up, and that's okay. God will do the rest. My favorite verse of the Bible, my life verse, is Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. This verse reads, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." When I came to celebrate recovery, I was broken. I was hopeless. I was hurting. But God turned that around and is now using me, using my past, using my testimony to reach those who are still broken. Working this program and giving my life to God has put me in a place to save the lives of others. As I said in the beginning, my story is still ongoing, but God has given me hope, healing, and happiness. God has given me restoration and love, and He will do the same for you. I am a grateful believer in Jesus. I celebrate recovery over my lack of self-worth. I come before God with my PTSD and depression, and my name is Katie. And thank you for letting me share my story.
You know, testimonies always get to me. If you haven't figured that out, Katie is my daughter-in-law. And we couldn't be prouder of her. God changed her, as you can see, and He's going to do the same for you. Just a couple things I wanted to just share with you. You know, going through the process, there were people who had harmed her deeply. And she never thought in a million years that she could ever forgive them. But then she stepped in to CR. She got involved in a step study. She worked these steps, and the Lord did an incredible work in her life. Today, she is no longer bound by the chains that bound her for all these years, because she forgave. Forgiveness and making amends is the greatest thing you can ever do. And so just, man, take advantage of that. She said that she's not alone in her fight. I want to ask you, how many of you here tonight, you feel alone? Yeah, I see some hands going up. You are not alone. We are with you in the fight. We're going to love you through this, whether you want it or not. You are part of our family. And here's the other thing that you need to know. God is going to use your horrible, horrible events in your life, and He's going to use that testimony to reach people that only you can reach. So share your story, and welcome home to CR. We're so happy you're here tonight. Let's give her another big, big hand tonight. Will you stand with me? Let's worship Jesus. Let's give Him all we got.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but He brought me in. Oh, His love for me. Yes, His love for me. Through the
treasures that fade are never enough. And you came along and put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied, Lord, here in your love. Sing it out. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. I know it's true. Amen. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. And there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. We praise you tonight. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Come on. You turn mourning, you turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You turn beauty for ashes, yes you do, Lord. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn great. You
Wasn't this a great night? My name is Micah. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I'm in recovery for anger and pornography. Thanks for spending time with us tonight. Those of you watching online, make sure you go to open share groups online at 7:45 p.m. And if you're here in person, make sure you go to groups. We love you here at CR, First NLR, and we want you to be healthy and safe. And in an effort to keep everyone in attendance healthy and safe, vaccinated and unvaccinated people, I need you to wear your mask at open share groups. The only time in your group you can take off your mask is when you share. This is not a political motivation. This is done out of love, and it is temporary. Let's love one another by wearing our masks and keep each other safe in this uncertain time. Thanks in advance for understanding. But here's your leader's question. What is your big takeaway from Katie's testimony? Share how it has impacted you. I want to encourage everyone to make sure you go to groups tonight. Newcomers, please join Pastor Lane and Marcia in the guest center. And if you're watching online, join and participate in the online groups. But before we go to groups, Michelle is going to do the Serenity Prayer.
I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with codependency. My name's Michelle. Let's do the Serenity Prayer together. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. Taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. Let's go to group.